is Alex, and yes, I have been gone for a very long time, and while I was thinking about what ideas I could do for a movie, I've realised that I haven't done any movie battles for a long time. And because of my absence, I have decided to look at two movies I really didn't want to look at. These are movies that have angered me so much. Films I find insulting, manipulative. Films I hate so much that they've ended up on my top 10 most hated films list. I am of course talking about the 2015 Cinderella and the 2017 Beauty and the Beast.
I'm sorry people, but I just don't understand why they are so light. And believe me, I've really tried. But I end up either screaming into my pillow or asking myself, why did I do this in the first place?
Ask me what it means. 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 Ask me what it means.
Both these movies are remakes from classic Disney animated fairy tales that made a ton of money and was praised by critics. But for me, I found them annoying, manipulative, and insulting. So doing this is like asking which torturer's death I'd rather experience, but I'm going to decide which one of these films sucks the least. Keep in mind that when comparing these two, I also have to compare them to their animated counterparts, because, well, it's impossible not to.
Now before I go and start ranting and moaning, if you enjoy these two movies, that's great. In fact, I'm quite pleased that you enjoyed aspects of it, I suppose. But for myself, I guess I'll just have to ignore my conscience. Sorry, Jiminy. And look at the remakes of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. First off, let's look at our two leading ladies.
Now, this is actually one of the major problems I have with these two movies, in that they're trying to shove down your throats that these two are modern, strong, independent women, when in reality they are completely the opposite. Granted, they have ideas on trying to make it seem so, but it either goes nowhere or doesn't make any sense. For example, Belle shows that, like her father, she invents too, but it's only for one scene and never goes anywhere. She could have invented things in the castle showing her uniqueness everyone claims she has, or maybe used an invention for the final battle than just standing there. Ella, on the other hand, ends up going to the village a few times where she has friends. While it's not huge or anything, it questions why she doesn't leave the step-family. I know she says she stays because it's her parents' house, so why does she leave it so easily at the end? And even that, her parents would not want her to be abused 24/7, whether if they're dead or alive, so it feels like a lame excuse. But the biggest problem that makes it insulting to me is that both these girls don't care. They both just wander around the film either looking pretty or just have no expression on their faces. Belle always sounds so bored and Ella comes off way too passive, which totally backfires when they say she's smarter and stronger. This is especially during the ending when she's locked up in the attic while the Grand Duke is trying on the slipper downstairs. All she does is dance around singing without any awareness whatsoever. She doesn't even notice the mice opening a window for her that's happening right in front of her. I know people criticize the animated Cinderella, but by God, at least she tried. She always tried to find something positive in her situation by working hard and never giving up. I loved how she almost teased the stepsisters or managed to gain authority with the cat, and her kindness to the mice paid off. She sews them little clothes, saving them from the cat, and even in the climax being locked in the attic, she tries to hit the door, and when the cat stops the mice, it was her idea to call the dog. She tries anything that she can possibly do.
But in all fairness, at least Ella cares about her family. While it doesn't make sense within the story aspect of it, at least there's slight emotion there. Belle, on the other hand, does not care at all.
All the way through the entire movie, she walks, talks, sings, and pretty much everything without showing any emotion. She looks so bored and so disinterested that it has an effect on everything. Remember how scared Belle in the original was when she first saw the Beast but still sacrificed her freedom? Remember how excited she was during Be Our Guest? Remember how caring and comfortable she was with the Beast while dancing? In this one, she has such a blank expression that she could pass as Kristen Stewart acting.
Oh yeah, I went there. So while both these two leading ladies are awful and in my opinion really bad role models for little girls, at least Ella cared a tiny bit, while Emma, not Belle, Emma did not care in the slightest. So, how do you mess up two of Disney's greatest animated villains? There you go.
You can't deny that the originals gave us memorable villains. Gaston we know as the town hero, praised for being strong, good-looking, and a hunter. While not so much brain power, he goes through a transformation in contrast to the beasts. Lady Tremaine, I argue, is one of the scariest Disney villains, from how she displays authority, threatens, and does everything to make sure that there is no happiness in Cinderella's life. When it came to the remake, however, they tried to make her more insecure and played more for laughs. It is interesting seeing why she hates Ella, but honestly, she comes off too weak, which is the opposite of who that character should be. Gaston in the remake has a difference of being a war hero.
Which actually becomes confusing as Gaston comes off as less of a jerk in the remake.
In the original, it's funny when the town praises his way of thinking while Belle is the only one that sees right through him, but it doesn't help seeing how everyone thinks she's odd. In this one, he's less of a jerk towards her, so it makes less sense why she dismisses him. I mean, compare these two scenes when Gaston tries to talk to Belle. In the original, he snatches the book from her, throws it in the mud, and makes fun of her father. In the remake, he gives her flowers and asks her about her book. In fact, his plan in the remake seems all over the place. At first, it's to get Belle to marry him, but then cover up his crimes for trying to kill her father, and then kill the Beast because...
I don't know.
In the original, he had one motivation and did everything he could to get it turning into more desperate measures. That is what made these two villains make sense and great. Both had one goal, but it's the lengths they took to get what they want. With the remakes, however, is it better to make less sense or have too many weaknesses? Now, in truth, it can be incredibly interesting when a villain has weaknesses, as it makes them more human, but the biggest problem is that for a Cinderella story, you need a threatening authority figure. That's what creates conflict for the fairy tale story. Cinderella needs to be weak at first, but fight through it, while the stepmother over time loses control. Part of what made the original animated film work was how serious we took the stepmother and how scary she was to kids. You could see how hard it was for Cinderella to escape, and therefore more joy when she goes to the ball. In the remake, there was never a moment when the stepmother was threatening or showed much control, and since we're told Ella was smarter, it makes even less sense why she didn't stand up to her. Even though in the original, Lady Tremaine was scary, Cinderella tried to fight back to be able to go to the ball. So both villains do a bad job, but since the stepmother is such an important element, it does more damage, so I guess Gaston is slightly better.
Well, considering that both these movies have failed with their protagonists and antagonists, what about the supporting roles at least?
Both these remakes give us great examples why some things work well in animation but horrendously bad in live action. In animation, you can accentuate facial expressions, but in real life, it looks terrifying. I remember gasping when the servants were introduced in Beauty and the Beast. The mice in Cinderella, even though they're not hideous, but they're pretty pointless. You know they put them there because it's cute and it's from the original.
In all fairness, even though I despise Cinderella so much, the most easily best part of the movie is the prince and the king.
And I'm not just saying that because the actor played Robb Stark in Game of Thrones, but he was the only likeable character aside from his father, as he wants to be a good king and wants his father to be proud, even if some traditions he wants to break, like not marrying a princess. Now that plot point is pretty pointless and wraps up too quickly in my opinion, but at least the relationship has some emotion there. In fact, I thought it would have been interesting if the whole movie centered around the prince's point of view. It would have made it different and intriguing seeing it from another character, aside from Cinderella. Everyone else, though, is pretty pointless and adds nothing new, like the mice, the stepmothers, and yes, even the fairy godmother.
In Beauty and the Beast, we get the exact same characters and... oh my god, they were so painful to watch!
Even with a long list of talented actors, the supporting characters mostly feel like they're reading lines. You could see in the back of their heads they know they couldn't compare to the original cast. Even when Emma Thompson seems to be trying, she probably knows she's not going to be Angela Lansbury. Of course, the worst one was the Beast. What was a fascinating character in the original, where he was a brute with animalistic movements. You could understand why, and you could slowly see his humanity growing, and his affection for Belle is now just nothing. The CGI is terrible, and it hurts even more knowing it was originally going to be makeup. He barely raises his voice, barely moves like an animal.
In fact, he's barely in the first half of the movie! We make less of a connection with him as well as Belle making less of a connection with him!
But it makes it better because he's got a tragic backstory, so that should explain everything, right? No! It comes off forced, and since there is a lack of emotion from him, like I said, you can't relate or build a connection with him. There was never a moment when you could see him changing or building a strong bond with Belle, as it comes off incredibly forced.
I guess when it comes down to it, the supporting characters that are more relevant to the story is Beauty and the Beast.
It might have been told horribly, but they still contribute for something in the story, whether it's for the romance or at least helping out. It's hard to imagine the story without these characters. The remake of Cinderella, aside from the prince, feel a lot more useless. The stepsisters are the most forgettable, and actually, you know what? Thinking about it, the stepsisters in the animated film is the most relevant I have seen in any Cinderella adaptation. They weren't just there to contrast with Cinderella's kindness and beauty, but the stepmother uses them to make sure she gets her way. In the scene where the sisters destroy her dress, you see the stepmother thinking about to plan it. She pretty much silently encourages them to destroy it, as she knows they'll get angry that their old clothes were used. The mice had a point to the moral of kindness in the original, where Cinderella helps them out even when it results in her getting punished. So when she's told to work more when she tries to make the dress herself, they feel bad and make it for her. They show how kindness pays off, so there's a point to why they talk. Even the fairy godmother seems pointless in the remake. If they want to show Ella as strong, smart, independent, they could have shown her coming up with a way of getting to the ball on her own. She she could have still wear her mother's dress, and since the film shows she can ride a horse, so she could easily ride off to the castle. Even if the dress was ruined, considering it was only a couple of rips, she could have easily sewn it back. That would actually make her more independent and never giving up. So really, the godmother is pointless.
Yes, the fact that they still contribute to the story while the Cinderella remake, they're just there. I guess Beauty and the Beast wins the point, despite the fact that the supporting characters were awful. Well, with a ton of money put into these remakes, does it really show? Let's look at Imagery.
Now, despite how awful these movies are, they do look nice. They do give a fairy tale feel and can look magical at times, so I'm just gonna be the annoying one here and say sometimes it's a bit over the top. This is mostly in the case with Cinderella, with the first 10 minutes being so overblown happy that it felt like I was watching Teletubbies or Tweenies. It's that much. And is it me, or does Ella's dress look too much like Giselle's dress from Enchanted, although that one was played for laughs? Because of that, I could not take that dress seriously. I kept laughing throughout the ball scene because it just looks so ridiculous. Beauty and the Beast, however, feels lazy. I'll say in Cinderella's case, they tried to let the moments sink in and the environments, even if it was over the top and the characters weren't good. You could still admire the colours. Beauty and the Beast suffers because a lot had to rely on visuals, and it does not help. For example, in the original, Belle and her father's house was far away from the village, showing how they were cut off from everyone, as well as Belle being the only one who wore blue, making her stand out and be different. In the remake, the house is in the middle of the village and half the people wear blue, so there's not much to visually represent Belle as unique, and clearly Emma doesn't pull it off. Also, the interior of the castle is too nice looking. Remember when Belle first walks through the hallways looking at everything that's beastly, as well as the destroyed West Wing, and having these scenes play out, taking its time? The remake castle was too cluttered, too nice, so when Belle enters the place, you never see the effect everyone has because of her, and the romance blooming like it did in the original.
So really, because Beauty and the Beast was very lazy in its imagery, and the fact that the CGI was awful, it makes the effect worse on the audience. Cinderella may have been over the top, but at least it lets the environment soak in, so I guess it gets the point there. So it comes down to which story was retold slightly better than the other one. Here's best story. Nearly finished.
This is the other major problem with these remakes, is how they are written. The stories are trying so hard to be more logical and politically correct and explain things most of the time.
But here's the thing. They are fairy tales!
They are not meant to make much logical sense. The Disney fairy tales give a little more detail than the original source materials, but the main element that keeps us coming back is the emotions. We know that fairies, magic, talking mice, and talking furniture don't exist, but the emotion and morals is what keeps it feeling real and important to us. The animated originals knew to keep the story simple, but showed the driving force of the characters, and the emotions paid off. In Cinderella, they knew to show how hard it was for our protagonist against the stepfamily and build up to the breaking point. You see how Cinderella is trying to hold it together, but when she sees the opportunity of the ball, she tries to fight back and makes a deal with the stepmother. So, the stepfamily tried to make sure she doesn't finish her work in time, so she can't go. Now, because of the kindness she showed towards the mice, they make the dress for her by risking their lives to get old materials they know the stepsisters dislike. When she gets the dress and shows she keeps her end of the deal, the stepmother uses her daughters to destroy it, and Cinderella is left in pieces.
Point is, they knew how to build up her lowest moments, so when the fairy godmother does arrive, when she goes to the ball, you feel more happy for her because it felt earned.
In the remake, however, it tries way too hard to be modern and make it more logical with more detail, but it never goes anywhere, and so when the fairy tale stuff happens, it makes less sense, and by trying to make the main characters look stronger, they end up showing no emotion, and therefore we cannot be invested. I didn't feel anything for Ella because they would just tell her what she was, but not experiencing who she was.
But even though I think Cinderella is insulting and pointless, it's not as insulting and pointless as Beauty and the Beast.
Cinderella had an opportunity to be retold. As you could tell, it in so many ways, and even though nothing felt new or interesting, as so many others provided, like something different or incredibly emotional, it didn't feel as pointless as Beauty and the Beast, and it clearly shows. About 90%.
Actually, no! I go with 95% is from the animated movie.
It really felt like I was watching a near shot-for-shot remake with the logic of, oh, well, if the original did it, then we have to do it, without realizing why they were done in the animated film. None of the actors give anything different from their animated counterparts. The songs were just there with no reason other than terrible singing. Even with the few changes, they are just there to pad things out. But when the order of scenes were changed, it made less sense. In fact, the most important scenes between Belle and the Beast went by so fast, and because of their lack of emotion, they have no chemistry whatsoever. And when you have no chemistry in a romance, yeah, it's a massive fail. It felt like the animated one with horrible effects, marketing manipulation, and everything was just lifeless.
So despite that my feelings have not changed towards these movies, I still hate them with a passion, I will admit that the one that was the most awful, most insulting, most pointless, most lifeless, with absolutely nothing to offer, would be the remake of Beauty and the Beast. There, I'm done. Finally done looking at these two movies. Now I could just move on and look at films I like. And you know what? I'm going to look at two movies next time that are cute, charming, and irresistible. Like a little puppy. Like a little puppy. That'd be cute. I'll see you later, guys.